That opens a good
He just needs to
and if it's find yet, it's still.
I know. Yeah.
I have 3 minutes. That's tough.
Thank you, Chair. We're in session.
Okay, great.
The press in.
All right, thanks very much, everybody. Coming to the November 22nd Regional Board meeting. I want to acknowledge we're holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation. We have an agenda in front of us. As far as I know, there have been no changes to it. So do we have a motion to adopt the agenda? Next corner. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Minutes of the inaugural regional.
Land acknowledgement is to be at the beginning of each meeting.
I didn't already.
Oh, we did? Oh, on my apologies. I'm sorry.
And it's not a part of the policy anyways.
Is it not? Oh, okay.
3.1 minutes of the inaugural regional board meeting, November 1st, 2023. Any errors or omissions? No hands up. So motion to Director McCormick. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. You have no delegations and inquiries, I guess. No unfinished business, and we have just one piece of correspondence. So if there is no other business or write anything from that piece of correspondence, I'll go on to my report. Along with quite a few of you, on October 27th, I attended the signing ceremony of the Memorandum of Understanding between the province of BC and the Tla'amin Nation concerning their commitment to safeguard the future of the former Millside T-Squat. I gotta say, it was a beautiful day. It was attended by Hagus John Hackett of the Tla'amin Nation, BC Premier David Eby, and the Honorable Murray Rankin, Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. The whole ceremony was really neat. One particularly touching part of it was the fact that they traditionally have the oldest and youngest members of the nation witness the event. So Tla'amin Elder Elsie Paul was the oldest, and then 2 tiny twins were the youngest. So they acknowledged their presence by having their footprints put on the document in the same, I guess you might be considered paint that they were using for the to create petroglyphs back in the day. It's very neat to be there. I was very pleased to have been invited. November 2nd, had a Zoom call with staff from the Ministry of Housing regarding the proposed legislation that is intended to deliver more small-scale, multi-unit housing and to update zoning rules to increase volume of the housing market quickly. November 9th, I had another Zoom call, Ministry of Housing again, regarding proposed legislation intended to deliver more housing near transit hubs and community amenities and to streamline processes to fund key services, infrastructure, and amenities for growing communities. Now, both this meeting and the one that I mentioned previously, November 2nd, they are more applicable to municipalities than electoral areas, but there are certain aspects that we need to take note of. And from what I understand, planning department staff was in attendance, so they were able to pick up on all that. November 8th, Stillwater Community Advisory Group, a regular report on Western Forest product news. And we did a review of the riparian standard and the upcoming forest operations map. How the public can comment on those future forestry plans. It's not up and running yet. It's coming in the new year, I believe, but they have a data model out. November 11th, as you guessed, at the Remembrance Day ceremony held at Dwight Hall and at the Cenotaph. I participated in the wreath laying ceremony as the representative from the Cathay Regional District. November 14th, along with Director Elliott, met with the VIU Steering Committee. We looked at results from a survey taken by Brooks students regarding their plans after high school, especially when it came to additional education or training. The main agenda was then to consider how the organizations could be involved in public engagement, but after some discussion, it was determined we really needed to decide which questions we needed to ask before getting to the public engagement stage. Some of the info we're looking for may have already been collected by the school district and other bodies. So we have another meeting coming up in December, and we'll go on with the public engagement inquiry then. November 20th, had a library meeting, and I'm happy to say business as usual down there. So let's move on to Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, there was a signing of a memorandum of understanding at T-Squat with the provincial government and I did attend that. It was a beautiful ceremony. I congratulate the Coahoma Nation in completing that memorandum of understanding with the province, and fully interested in how we can work together at the local level to facilitate any discussions around things that might be related to that memorandum of understanding for all governments involved. So on November 3rd, I went to a provincial community action team forum in Vancouver. Was the only representative from our region there, and I sat on a panel for local government who are participating on community action teams. And we discussed how our community action team involves local government people in our area. It was well received. I brought our chair, Catherine, to present with me. We did a joint sort of presentation. We put it together and we discussed the power of municipal and local governments in an area to set the tone and contribute to harm reduction messaging and stigma reduction. And the goal was to help community action teams to involve local governments. So here in our region, they were trying to schedule a local government participation in consultations with the provincial community action team forum. It was going to be on November 15th. It wasn't going to work out. There was too many conflicts. They're bumping that into the new year and are coming out with a new date in here. I think it's in February. And I encourage everybody to attend because I think it's super important that the local governments hear from the provincial level community action team what the goals are and how we can help promote good messaging throughout our regions around harm reduction and stigma reduction for the crisis that we currently have going on in our province. And so I've been involved. I would like to see really high participation when they come to our community and present to us. And so I ask that of everybody here. I'm on the Western Forest Products Community Advisory Group, but I sit there for the city, so I'll leave it to that one. I'll report out that one at that forum along with some of my other city duties. The Vancouver Island Coastal Communities Climate Steering Committee Climate Summit Planning Meeting. So annually we have a climate summit. We're trying to time in with the AVICC. I'm on the breakaway group, the working group, the subcommittee to help plan that. So I attended that on November 9th and we had a good discussion. They'll be wrapping that into some notes and moving forward with another meeting before our actual meeting, which we will report out on in December. And so I did that. Did attend the post-secondary planning at that meeting. Really enjoyed it. We had good discussion there as the chair reported out on. Thought about it over here. I had attended a workshop for the BC Ferries Charting the Way for folks who are on the advisory committees. And I highlighted many of the things that I spoke to earlier in the committee of the whole, but I'll highlight them again. So they've set out some broad goals and I made points around safety that had to do with lineups before clients actually got through the ticket booth to buy their way in, or where there is no ticket booth, where you're lined up along the side of the highways or areas without access to washrooms or what have you. And as those lines become longer and people are waiting ferry waits before they can get to a place where bathrooms are available and there's hot cars and small children, and it just seemed that that was a safety issue that needs to be addressed in the future. The Charting the Way has actually got an online survey, which we encourage everybody to participate in. They're trying to plan out for 50 years, out to 2050. So it's more of a futuristic thing. And if things are chronically a problem with BC ferries, having them addressed in the future plan would be great. The themes are moving toward a modern way of transport, and they're wanting to do energy efficiency, climate action, and maybe redirecting services to be more, they're saying user-friendly, but but they've also acknowledged that collaborating with local communities is going to be paid more attention to in the future, because we're going to see a lot of visits for wilderness and outside of the current busy zones. They're looking to spread that across the province a little bit more. And so they're trying to do economic development that includes all of that, which means the service has to support it and promote our communities. So that was kind of interesting. We did talk a little bit about affordability being an issue for not just the ferry fares, but rather travel in general when you're left behind and you can't get home, or you have medical trips where you can't always predict exactly when you might get discharged from a hospital. And all of that has to be wrapped into the affordability package, because if people can't afford to go to medical appointments, or their whole family's budget is being disrupted because they can't get home, those are issues for affordability. I pointed out that the community of Powell River has sometimes very different interests than the Lower Sunshine Coast, and our voice is sometimes overridden by the Lower Sunshine Coast as far as what is required for them versus what is required for us, and that there needs to be a way to listen to minority voices, smaller communities, and not get overrode by the interests of the larger communities. I also went to the Supportive Housing Community Advisory Committee, which I sit on for the city as well, but I hadn't heard anyone else reporting out on it. So I'll just let you know that we discussed a lot of things there, and we had involvement from local community. We talked about community concerns around the fence at the supportive housing. We talked about how they've improved their undercutting in the brush in the area around it. They've limbed upwards on the trees, providing better visibility. They've managed to curtail some of the block cutting on the gate, but there's still a lot of issues around the fence getting cut and people breaching the fence, but the fence is a big help. We had discussions around matrices and stats that are being kept and whether those are appropriate and what the trends are around those kinds of things. And it was a very good meeting. I also attended the BC Ferry Advisory Committee on November 16th, and we discussed reservations, the fact that lack of staff could mean that there would be a sailing with 50% of the capacity used, and that those sailings then don't provide a service notice. And some people can get left behind because the boat's leaving only half full, and yet there was no FERT service advisory put out, so people didn't know that it was a potentially get left behind situation. And so that communication, and BC Ferry's response was, well, we only tell you when we're not going to sail. We don't tell you when we're going to sail half full. And we're kind of going, well, okay, that's not fair. So we talked about that. And the BC Ferry's commissioner coming hopefully to our next in community advisory committee meeting. There are still some, I think they're going to come here. They were thinking about doing everything virtually, and they look like they might actually come here again. They're going to come up with some procedures to
Take the ferry. Sorry.
Well, yeah, they don't want to take people's space on the ferry. No, it was about safety. They had some staff feeling unsafe at some of the recent meetings. And we learned a little more about that incident, that it was an individual who was just incredibly overwrought at that time, saying things they wouldn't normally have said, and they were easily escorted away. And but anyway, so they came up with they just shut everything down at that point and didn't come to any communities, but they're gonna figure that out and come back, I guess. We did talk a little bit about how there was a grant opportunity for from the Island Trust for improving road widths was a eligible expenditure for that funding opportunity, and we didn't realize that, so we kind of missed it. The amount wasn't very much. I think it was only up to $5,000, which doesn't give you much. Looks, I mean,
Much road.
but anyway, it appears as though it will come up kind of in the future again. We just don't know when. We'll keep our eye on that. And that was it for all of those meetings.
Great, thanks very much. I want to say I appreciate your continued advocacy for the residents of the community with BC Ferries. Because you say way up here, we can be forgotten about sometimes, and you got to keep pushing it. Director McCormick.
Thank you. And I don't think there's such a thing as pushing BC far. So mine is slightly different. It's kind of a quick snapshot of life on Texada in the last month, because all of my reports are on Texada things. The library on the 28th of October sponsored an author reading by Todd Caldecott. Topic food as medicine. Really interesting speaker. I don't know if he speaks at Powell River off the library, but he's certainly worth going to hear. On the 30th was a COVID flu clinic, and they do this all day long at the community hall. Have people go through, you have a set time and so on. And they had 8 stations set up, so many people, including myself, got the next vaccination. On the 11th, I laid a wreath on behalf of local government at Remembrance Day ceremonies. Unfortunately, the sun was shining, so that was okay. On the 12th, there was the annual general meeting of Texada Action Now. If you wonder what that's all about, that is a community action group that comes together to fight things. Typically, the last one was the storage of liquid natural gas on Texada, creating a storage facility for that. But the group has come together over numerous topics in the past, garbage dumps, etc. And so the decision was, although there's nothing pressing, they want to stay together. And while there were some mining issues, concerns raised about current mining activity, the group is going to continue to monitor that and not act right away. On the 13th, I was at the Texada Island Community Society regular meeting, and the idea came forward, put together by myself and a couple other people, for a Texada Spirit Award that would be granted not annually and not to one person, but rather as needed. So it could happen a number of times during the year. It could happen to multiple people. And so that is now being worked on. 15th, I was at the Texada Garden Club for a talk on soil remediation. So that was good. And on the 21st, I attended the Texada Airport Advisory Committee. The main topic, 2 topics, I guess. One was the continued lease renewal update. They're updating the lease for hangar owners, so hangar leases. And so that's finally, I think, coming to where they've got a good product. And there was also talk about the budget for next year. And finally, also as of yesterday, you may have heard that the Gillies Bay Post Office is closing down effective December 21st. And people who have mailboxes there, including myself, were notified of this, but no solution has been put forward. There was a fear among everyone that we'd have to change our addresses, because our mailing addresses are far more important, really, than our civic address. But as it turns out, they have now come up with a solution. We will be moved to community mailboxes and we do not have to change our addresses. So people are much relieved. So that concludes my report, Chair. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, sounds like a busy month.
Busy month.
Texada. Yeah, I agree with you. Remembrance Day, I was really happy it was sunny because if you remember the 10th, it was just miserable. Yeah. Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Let me just see here. Okay. I did attend the signing ceremony at the T-Squat site that the chair referenced. On the 29th and 30th of October, I held 2 open houses for the residents of Area B. Had very good turnout on the Sunday afternoon session, but then on Monday night we had about 6 or 7. It was very good conversations, a lot around development pressures, land use planning, those kind of things. I also made it very clear to the people that showed up, this was not a regional district function or district service, and this was a political thing. But it was very good to hear a lot of interest around, housing and developments and those kind of things. And, some talk about, maybe ideas around lot coverage or floor area ratios rather than dwellings per hectare. Then we had the planning committee on the 1st, and then I believe it was the 3rd, which the chair referenced, that there was the announcement from the provincial government about proposed legislation on Bill 44, which was, I think, 2 dwellings allowed on every property, and a number of comments from the premier around the elimination of single-family zoning bylaws across the province, which those that know me know that I've been rattling on about single-family dwellings and exclusionary zoning policies for a number of years. It's almost become a meme at UBCM. So when that announcement was put out there, I started getting some messages from other elected officials in other jurisdictions going, hey, Mark, what's your thoughts? What's your comments? And I've even been invited to do a podcast. Then on the 6th, I attended the Regional Connectivity Knowledge Network meeting, which has to do with connectivity in rural areas. That's something through the UBCM. A lot of really good discussions there around rural connectivity. And something that came up that now is just coming back into my brain from that session was that in areas where they're having these big disasters and fires, they found that a lot of the fiber wires would occasionally get burned and they would lose connection for their emergency response. And they actually found that they were relying on Starlink to still be able to connect with their fire crews and with the province and their emergency operations centers. And I don't know what our emergency operations center has access for backups. Hopefully underground wires don't have issues. I mean, underwater wires don't have issues with fire, but earthquakes, I think, would still have that issue. So that was an interesting discussion around satellite connectivity for emergency responses. On the 8th, I attended the internal committee of the Agricultural Advisory Committee. We had a lot of really good discussions around policies for ALR exclusion policies. Let's see. I'm missing something. Oh yeah, we're on the 22nd. Oh, there is one thing that and then there is one thing that happened in a nearby jurisdiction, which I think has something of importance on our agenda coming up later. With all this discussion around, exclusionary zoning and single-family zoning bylaws and all that kind of fun stuff, and me never shutting up about it at conventions, it was brought to my attention that the district of Seashelt, the municipality, has passed the first reading of their new OCP, which completely eliminates the units per hectare in their official community plan. And I'm going to quote one of their councillors. Quote, units per hectare needs to go from our OCP, and even if we do adjust the FAR ratios at a later date, it's still progress towards removing units per hectare. So I would like to applaud the district of Seashelt for the work they've done there. Because yeah, I should probably shut up about it. But I'm excited to see that kind of progress. And it seemed almost kind of a little fortuitous in relation to the town halls that were done at the very beginning of the month, because then it was like within a week, the province announces Bill 44. And I think we're going to have to step in line and kind of get up to date with the new provincial regulations. And I think that's it, though I probably did miss something or forget something. It's been a long day. My apologies, Chair.
Oh, that's well, good. Yeah, it's interesting about the connectivity. I mean, the new technology you get in is always great, but then there's always ways that it can fail. It's a matter of kind of analyzing each situation to find out where the weaknesses are.
Yeah,
for them.
Yeah, on that there was a case in the north where there was a fire and one wire burned, and apparently the entire Yukon went down. And they went, it's just one wire burned and the entire territory went down. So
yeah, no, it's good to keep in mind. Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I was very fortunate that I was able to attend the Tisquat MOU signing virtually. It was very good to see and be at least part of from here. On November the 9th, the island held a mushroom festival and invited Mr. Andy McKinnon, who's the co-author of The Plants of Coastal BC and the author of a new book called Mushrooms of British Columbia. And so it's a very good new publication by the Royal BC Museum. And he's just an amazing person. His talk's very funny. And he took a walk, and in a couple hours, the participants were able to pick probably 30, 40, 50 species of mushrooms, and he was able to identify them all. And they laid them all out on paper so he could explain them on tables, and people could see them at the hall. So that was very good. Well turned out. Probably 50, 60 people were there participating. On November the 12th, I attended a call with the Lasqueti Island Internet Access Society regarding Connected Coast. The last AGM had a big turnover of their board, everyone except for one. This one person who carried on. So they were really not sure what was going on with Connected Coast. So I gave them as much as I could. And so there will be a little bit more on that. And as an aside, actually at UBCM, David Leach, the CAO of Strathcona Regional District, and I guess he's the CEO of Connected Coast, approached me and said, there's some news coming out of Saltery Bay. I think the funding got approved. And so there's going to be some information coming on some of the projects. So that will be good news moving forward. On November 18th, again, he said it was not, that's not secret anymore. So November 18th, the Lasqueti Island Volunteer Fire Department organized to bring over an instructor to Lasqueti to hold occupational first aid level 1 and CPRC certification training at the community hall for the public, open to the public. And it was very well attended. There were probably at least 30 people took it. I took it. Very affordable. And they had 30 something, about maybe 30 people took it, and members of the fire department were there as resources all day, hands-on. And the instructor was very good, and lots of equipment back and forth, and so well attended. The fire department's going to try to hold another one next spring, because ideally, when you have 30 people take it, that's nearly 10% of the full-time residents. So the more the better. And of course the fire department hopes this is a recruitment opportunity, but at least it's an opportunity that when first responders show up to calls, the people who are there are doing the right thing already, and they're not coming into a mess. They know what to say, they haven't done anything wrong, and they've done some right things. And that leads, unfortunately, to ferry woes, which I'll try to be brief on. And the reason I bring it up is because we've had a lot of cancellations, and the instructor got stuck all of Sunday because the certification training was on Saturday and the ferries were canceled all day Sunday. So the instructor had to spend an extra day on Lasqueti Island, which may have been good or bad, depending on what she had organized. And we had our main ferry was away for 6 weeks, and since it's come back, we've had many cancellations. I think by my reckoning, we had so far in November, we've had 7 days with one or more sailing cancellations. I think 15 sailings. So it's a significant. Since the beginning of July, it's been something like 27 days with one or more canceled sailings. So it's been ongoing. Some things have improved. The operator uses our direct notification better, so the public at least gets notified when there's cancellations, which doesn't help with the cancellation. Our MLA, Adam Walker, spoke in question period earlier in the month in the legislature to ask the minister to try to hold BC Ferries to account for the contract to hold a public meeting. The contract with the operator says there would be annually a public meeting on Lasqueti, organized by the operator. The contract was signed 4 years ago. There hasn't been one yet, despite repeated calls. The minister can only do so much, but we'll look into it. and and you can only really, I guess, pressure BC Ferries because BC Ferries is the signatory. So we have this kind of articulation, which makes our situation even more difficult. So the ministry can lean on BC Ferries. The BC Ferries can try to lean on the operator to hold the contract, which at the very least holding a public meeting, which unfortunately, if and when it happens, is probably not going to be the most pleasant experience, because people have some concerns when people are missing appointments and so on. So that's leading the ferry committee. The ferry committee has been very active, taking many meetings. I won't list them, but just wrote a letter to the minister with a number of requests, and has summarized information for the public, because the public has various understandings, or proper understandings or not so proper. So trying to clarify what's going on and so on. And there's a contract is coming up for renewal in the spring. And we've been asking that this public meeting be held before the contract gets renewed. Sorry, it's a renewal within the existing contract. It's an extension, not a new bid. And so far this hasn't happened. So we're concerned there will be just an extension rubber stamped without actually having a public meeting on Lasqueti per the contract. So anyways, that's more on the ferry than I intended to say, but thank you, Chair.
No problem. I hate to think, but sometimes you must sit there on the Lasqueti, and when we're talking about BC Ferries complaints, you must think we're a bunch of whiners compared to what you're dealing with some of these days. Did you have Paul?
I just had a question, Director Fall, so I can best represent you at our advisory committee meetings. The contract is with a company that runs the ferry for Lasqueti, and the contract is managed by BC Ferries.
So the way it works, which is really awkward, is that the ministry comes up with the contract writing, I think, and the money, and BC Ferries signs it. So the contract is between BC Ferries and Western Pacific Marine, the operator of the service. So the BC Ferries receives the money. It's called an unregulated route. So BC Ferries receives money that they turn around and pay the operator with. And the reason it's awkward is because BC Ferries has their own issues, and I wouldn't, diminish anyone's concerns about ferries. They can be anxiety building experiences when they don't run. So BC Ferries is focusing on their issues and probably doesn't have the energy, the resources, the time, the focus to deal with these unregulated. But the minister can only do so much. Ministry, because they don't have the oversight. BC Ferries is the signatory, they're the contractee. So yes, that would be really great if you were able to just mention that really the main thing we're asking is for BC Ferries to make sure the contract's being met, and it's not. We've written to the minister listing off many things that have not been met, and this is just one of them. The public meeting, the actual service levels are for sure high on the list, and they're not being met. So
great.
Thanks.
Thanks very much, Director Fall. Director Lennox.
Thank you, Chair. In no particular order, once again, having regular monthly meetings with the London Community Society, who are very active. And they'll also issue their fall edition of the Barnacle newsletter. So I recommend that you go online or purchase a copy. All things sort of north side are captured there, and lots of good information. I usually put a little blurb in there as well. Lots of emails and phone calls in my area on a regular basis about many of the things we've already talked about. Internet service, right? So connectivity. We've had our recent announcement of the Scalp, Sultry Bay, and Lund, but that just raises questions for those poor folks who aren't serviced and are in some cases in situations, emergency type situations, where they're worried about their service or have no service at all. So we're still trying to advocate for them and also fill them in on what that connected coast kind of plan is, and working with people on that. So fielding calls there. Quite a few, regular Savary issues, which as we approach the OCP review and just, our slope studies and different good work that's going on, having good conversations with the groups and folks over there. Also regular updates from the Northside Community Recreation Center Building Committee. So really looking forward to the RFP and all that good work getting underway and getting a lot of activity out in Lund here in the coming year. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend the local Leadership United meeting here in town. I'm not sure, Cindy, if you were able to, but that's the Community Action Initiative and the Center for Disease Control had a session here in town about the unregulated drug poisoning crisis and about healthy communities. And I was scheduled to go on the 12th, but then they had to reschedule for the 15th and I was out of town, but I'm very interested to hear if
Can I respond?
Sure.
So in my report, I talked about how they tried to hold it on the 15th. They're now rescheduling. It hasn't happened yet. It'll be rescheduled to January.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for that, because I'm very interested to participate. It's an effort to involve local government. So thank you for that. November 11th, you're right. The sun came out for Remembrance Day and it was really nice for everybody. And, you know, always makes me pause and really think on that day. So I was glad I was able to go to that. I was able to go to our first Lund Waterworks Improvement District meeting with our new receiver, Frances Ledre. And so that was good. And she's well underway, meeting all the appropriate people, working with our CAO and others. So still lots of work to go there. And other calls from other improvement districts and private water systems, as we all know. But this just indicates, as I learn more about it, that this problem for the 400 odd systems in BC is still ongoing. And I'm going to try to work with all of you and LGLA and UBCM to just keep pushing this rock up that hill. Help these folks. We all, those folks north of town, many of us suffered a almost 2-day power outage on the recent windstorm, which is also lots of fun for those who are kind of needing a shower, that type of thing. But it does teach you about resiliency and helping your neighbors out. I want to just special thanks to the fire departments who are out there in those terrible conditions, and you know, Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, the contractors that are doing our work, clearing ditches, clearing the roads, BC Hydro, obviously tons of work, and the flaggers and all these people that are out there in the middle of the night to get us our power back. So thanks for that. November 18th, the Lund Community Society held their annual Christmas craft fair, and the Highway 101 becomes very congested just outside of Wildwood if you're trying to go north. And I don't know, you know, I had to be very careful going through there, but that just indicates the popularity of that particular event. And all reports were that it was very successful. And just a couple more things, just looking as the holiday season approaches, looking out for our seniors, vulnerable people. During, you know, this is a tough holiday. There's a lot of pressures for people financially and otherwise, and just trying to, you know, watch out for folks and give them a hand if they need it. And just one thing that I probably should have brought up under correspondence, but it's an email that we've received recently. I want you all to be aware, and the public. Emergency management regulations are changing in the province, especially from the recent wildfire activity and other disasters. The financial assistance part of it is being considered, and there's public consultation. I was able to fill out the government survey for local governments. There's several categories. I encourage you to go check your emails. You'll find that there. For maybe ICC, they're reimagining financial assistance after emergencies for local governments and other stakeholders, which include tenants, homeowners, First Nations, cultural safety issues, small business, and farms. So this is your chance to speak up about what financial assistance could mean to as all of those stakeholders, and it's our chance before the 31st of December. So I encourage you to do that. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to echo your sentiments, calling attention to those workers that are out there in the worst of conditions to get our lives back on track, because we also south of town experienced 2 power outages recently of about 14 hours each. So it's good that they're out there. Director Dowd.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to keep it short. I attended along with just about everybody else. I think the MOU signing between the Klamath Nation and the provincial government. It was a great ceremony. I liked all the pageantry that was going on there and the symbolism. I had a chance to talk to Minister Rankin after the public part, and told him how much I appreciated the concept of working together. The MOU described really close working together between the provincial government and the Klamath Nation. I suggested to the minister that including local governments in that working together could probably be positive. By local governments, I mean the local government of the city of Powell River and the regional district, who were part of receiving the announcement that MOU happened, but weren't part of the creation of it. And I think there's more opportunities to work together in the future, which might work better for everybody. I also went to along with Councillor Elliott, went to the Supportive Housing Community Advisory Committee last week. And it seems like about an age ago now. And although the numbers are confidential, they are keeping a lot closer recording of the number of people who move in and out of the supportive housing, where they go, the amount of first responder activity and what they are for. And they have just had a short about 4 months of reporting on the numbers they're doing. They're recording now. They're busy processing them and trying to figure out what the numbers mean. But it looks to me like a positive performance for the supportive housing. They're getting better at what they do. And they're trying to study the numbers more so they can learn if they are doing what they intended to do, which was first get hard to house people off of the street and help them move on to other housing and other programs later on to become more happily integrated into society, I guess. But more work on that. And, generally the last meeting was a very positive meeting from all of the people who had attended, who see improvements going on there. There is, I see that's got a connection with LIFT looking for basically a homelessness task force, and the Supportive Housing Committee, Community Action Committee, is trying to focus on being exactly that, a supportive committee for the supportive housing, as opposed to all of the issues among housing, homelessness, and other social issues that are coming up in the city. I also saw the power outage thing going on, and my neighborhood actually was,
I'm coming to your house.
a few interruptions in the TV signal. I went to bed early because I was trying to watch a movie and it just wasn't working. So I went to bed early. But
Tough times.
But a little bit north of my place, power was out for a long time. A little bit south of my place on Chilco Avenue, power was out, I think, for 2.5 days. And as a matter of fact, as I drove down here this morning, the hydro crews were still there trying to fix the street lighting. So I know they came hard and strong, and they worked, from the windstorm right through till now. Yeah. And as long as we live in such a beautiful place with so many trees, it's going to keep happening. There we go. So thanks to all the people that kept it working. And there we go. I think I'll put an end to it there.
Okay, great. I'm really glad to hear that your opinion of the initiatives being taken on by supportive housing is you feel positive about that, and you saw positive steps being taken. I understand Director Elliott has one more thing, and then I'll add one.
Yeah, I apologize. I neglected to report out on something important. I wanted to formally recognize and thank Jim Palm as my alternate here on the regional district. He did resign at our last council meeting, and the council appointed Councillor Trina Isaacson as my new alternate, and it's imminently relevant because I do plan to be out of country from December 13th to 22nd, so I wanted to let everyone know and staff that I won't be here at that time, and hopefully we can get my alternate hooked up appropriately prior to me being gone. And so, and also just to recognize and say that Councillor Jim Palm did an amazing job of being an alternate. He was often here during our meetings, keeping up to speed, and I just really thank him for all of that. And he was also an excellent person to converse with about the upcoming things. He shared his thoughts with me on a regular basis, and I really appreciated that. Thanks.
Okay, great. And one thing I want to mention, it was a library issue. November 28th, 7 o'clock. They have an author visiting, John, I think it's Violent. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. But I've read two of his books, Golden Spruce, some of you may have heard it, and The Tiger. So he's going to be at the library. And if you want to hear him, show up early because it's probably going to be popular. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, on the power outage issue, because we had power outages in the valley as well. On one of them, a branch had come down, hit the wire, and there's a relatively short connection between Valley Building and Centennial Drive. Branch had came off. I contacted BC Hydro to let them know that, there was a branch come down off. And what they had told me on the phone was, oh yeah, they can have someone come and flick the switch back on, but they don't have any crews in Powell River. They got to send them up from Seashell. And I find that kind of concerning. And I'm wondering if maybe that's something for our emergency operations center, because if we get a major issue and we don't have anyone local to deal with a hydro issue, or, heaven forbid, you get a wire on Highway 101, and then, you got to get the ferry to go down and pick up the hydro crew. Well, how are the ferry workers supposed to get to the ferry if, say, there's wires on the road? And I'm just wondering if the person on the phone was maybe mistaken, do we actually have a hydro crew locally? Because that's concerning to hear them go, well, we got to send someone up to Seashell. We got a large area here, and it's and something as simple as a branch it's not the end of the world, but if we get a major issue and it's kind of like a chicken and the egg, well, we'll come pick you up. Well, you got to get the wire off the road so we can get our ferry crew down. Well, how do you get the wire off the road? So yeah, that's
good point. I'll mention that with the manager of emergency services.
Well, thank you.
Great. Moving on to the consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull anything off of it? That's a good one.
Yeah, I'd like to pull. I'm scared to do so, but I'm going to pull 10.4, the floor area ratio and lot coverage ratio. It says Area B official community plan OCP changes, but I know it's not just Area B.
Okay. Anybody else? Their hands. Does somebody want to move the consent agenda minus item 10.4? Director Lennox, Director McCormick. Any other discussion? None. All in favor? Motion is approved unanimously. So move on to 10.4, which is now 11.1.
I'll move it.
Seconded, Director Lennox. Any discussion? That'd be good one.
Yeah, the reason I've pulled this, and I'm curious to get some input from staff on this. I'm happy with the motion as it is now, but since our planning committee, the province has introduced their proposed legislation around, secondary dwellings and water systems and transit, and I'm wondering if, do we need to put in an amendment to add at the end? So the motion reads as is and then says and comply with the recently introduced legislation. I'm just wondering if it's necessary or if that will automatically be included in the report, because the landscape that we operate in from when we had our planning committee to now, shifting sands. So
I'm guessing that the department probably goes with whatever the current policies are, but we'll defer to Robin to answer the question.
Thank you, Chair. I don't recommend any changes to the motion. I think it's fine as is. Yes, the province has announced a whole slew of legislative changes, but none of those are coming into force until the middle of 2024, and electoral areas are exempt from many of the changes coming down the pipe, is my understanding. But I think that information is going to become clearer as time goes by. I don't think there's any changes needed to the motion that's on the floor.
Thank you very much.
And in that case, I'm happy with it, and I thank the manager of planning services for the input. And then I apologize for pulling it.
Now you have to move it. Now you have to move it.
Oh, I thought I already did.
Yeah, we had.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, what we've all seen is newspaper or late TV news announcements of these things. The devil is always in the details. The transit, the housing around transit hubs that allow something between 6 and 20-story buildings. I believe the definition of a transit hub is a place where 2 or more transit routes come together. And I don't think there's any electoral areas in the regional district where that happens, other than the one transit hub in at the mall in the city of Powell River, where there's I think 4 routes that come together in one place. So a lot of the details actually mean that they won't affect things in the regional district. They require water systems, sewer systems, etc., which don't occur everywhere. So, you know, I think they're mostly aimed at more urban places, maybe including the city of Powell River in some cases, but I don't think they're going to have as much effect as people think they might on what happens in the electoral areas.
I agree.
Yeah, I absolutely concur. The devil's in the details, and on that point, I know there's Bill 44, 45, and 46. I did read Bill 44, reads like stereo instructions, but and I think 45 talks more about transit hubs, but when I was reading 44, it actually said transit stops. And I went, wait a minute, a transit stop is very different than a transit hub. And there's also some legislation, some parts around, you know, local government water systems, and they identified municipalities and regional districts. And we do have a water system in Myrtle Pond, though right now there isn't actually a transit stop near it. And then, of course, it doesn't identify improvement districts for water systems, and then that, you know, ties in with Lund, which is an improvement district but might become a regional district water system. So I'm happy with the motion as is, and Director Dowd is absolutely correct. The devil's in the details, and one of the things I've heard from some phone calls from other elected officials is, you know, the legislation seems very targeted and focused around the Lower Mainland and larger urban centers. But then as you start getting out into the more rural or electoral areas, the details get very vague, and they're kind of like, well, I don't know. So I think we're going to find out more as time progresses. And yeah, there's been a bunch of newspaper articles that, you know, they interchange municipalities and local governments as though they're the same thing. And well, regional districts are local governments, and some legislation applies to municipalities but doesn't apply to regional districts. And there's some that it gets very blurry, but I'm happy with the motion as is. And I would also encourage our staff to take a look into what the district of Seashelt recently did, because there's a staff report there as well in relation to floor area ratios and dwellings per hectare. So I know we're on a time crunch, so that's it for me.
Okay, so seeing no other hands up, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. No resolutions. Appointment of signing officers.
I'll move.
Director Gisborne moves, Director Lennox seconds. Any discussion?
Just to ask, is this the new person that we've hired? And Nathan has moved to the rental services, I got that right?
Officer?
Yes, thank you.
Fill us in.
I just saw Linda join us here. So yes, Jason Cowenhoven has moved to the position of Manager of Environmental Services. And I think Linda, I'm not entirely sure if Celine is here right now to be introduced, but Celine is taking over that position. Thank you.
Great, any other discussion, or Director Lennox?
Any other staff changes that we should be aware of? Okay.
Everyone's preparing camera.
Ms. Greenan, would you want to add something to that, or?
Oh, thank you, Chair. No, I was just going to add that, yes, Celine Lillies is the new Assistant Manager of Financial Services, but she is away at a conference today. It's actually a long-term financial planning course.
Okay, thanks very much. So
thank you.
Is that your hand going up, or is that
No,
just
ready?
Okay, all right. So seeing no other discussion, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. No bylaws, no report, no new business. Question period.
Yeah.
Hello, Chair Galinsky from the Peak here. I don't have any questions this afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity.
Fantastic, no problem. Okay, 18.1 proposed closed session. Who wants to read it? Director Gisborne.
Okay. I move that the board move in camera, the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 931T, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at the preliminary stages, and that, in the view of the board, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public. L, discussions with regional district officers and employees respecting regional district objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98, annual regional district report, and N, the consideration of whether a board meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Seconded, Director Elliott. Any discussion? None, all in favor? Motion carries unanimously. We're going in camera.
You can see the darkness behind you now.
Yeah.
It's like the sun's gone down. Can't tell in here.
Back in open session.
Okay, we are back in open session after the in-camera meeting, and we have just one item to rise and report from. That is the board direct staff to negotiate a contract extension of 1 year with Sunshine Disposal for the operation of the recycling depots and the trucking of organic waste to Salish soils. With that, we've reached the end of our agenda, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Still on recess.
Yeah, we'll go back to where we were.
Yeah.
9:20.